This is a story about a company that did everything right. They researched their EOR options thoroughly. They chose one of the most recognized names in the market. They signed the contract, onboarded their first international hire, and got back to building their business. And then, 6 months in, reality arrived. Not in the form of a fine, not in the form of a legal letter, in the form of silence. Questions that took days to answer. Compliance changes that weren't flagged until after they'd taken effect. A termination in the Netherlands that required an urgent response and got a ticket number instead. Today, we're going to show you exactly what the difference looks like, not in a feature list, but in the moments that actually matter. Remote is a serious company. Let's be clear about that. They've built genuine global infrastructure, compliance engines, payroll rails, HRIS integrations across 80+ countries. Their platform is well designed, and their legal entity ownership in core markets is real. For large enterprises that need a platform to manage a standardized global workforce, Remote's infrastructure is solid. They've earned their market position, but infrastructure is not the same as expertise, and a platform is not the same as a person. The difference between those two things is where the real comparison begins. The support gap. Picture this: a 60-person SaaS company. They've been using Remote for 8 months. Payroll is running cleanly. Everything is fine until one Friday afternoon their head of people gets a call from their Berlin employee. There's a problem with her payroll. A tax code has been updated by the German tax authorities. Finanzamt. Her net salary has changed and she doesn't understand why. Her landlord is expecting rent on Monday. The head of people opens Remote support, types the question, gets a help center article, escalates, gets a ticket number. Estimated response, 48 hours. 48 hours in global employment is not a waiting room. 48 hours is a landlord not getting paid, an employee losing trust, a head of people spending their weekend manually calculating German payroll tax because no one picked up. At Teamed, same scenario, same Friday call. The head of people contacts their named specialist, Klaus, Germany. He picks up within 4 minutes. He already knows the Finanzamt update. He explains the tax code change, sends the calculation breakdown, and has a written summary to the employee before she goes to sleep. Same problem, different provider, completely different Friday. The compliance gap. A second scenario, a scaling fintech, 90 employees. They've been using Remote across 5 countries: UK, Germany, Netherlands, Poland, Spain. Everything is running. Until March, when the Dutch government updates the rules around fixed-term contract renewal, specifically the chain regulation that limits how many consecutive fixed-term contracts an employer can offer before the contract becomes permanent by law. Remote's platform doesn't flag it, not because they don't know, but because reactive compliance is their model. They respond to questions. They don't watch your account for the regulation that's about to change your employment obligations. By the time the fintech's legal team notices, the fixed-term chain has already triggered permanent employment status under Dutch law. They're now responsible for backdated holiday accrual, pension contributions, and a notice period they hadn't budgeted for. The damage isn't catastrophic, but it's real, and it was entirely avoidable. At Teamed, same fintech, same Dutch hire. 6 weeks before the 3rd contract renewal, their named Netherlands specialist flags the chain regulation, sends a memo, recommends 3 options: renew as permanent, restructure the engagement, or end the contract before the chain triggers. The fintech chooses permanent employment. They plan for it. They budget for it. They communicate it to the employee in advance. The regulation change becomes a managed decision, not an emergency. The complexity gap. A third scenario, this one is harder. A professional services firm. They've been on Remote for 2 years across 4 countries. The CFO has done the maths. At their current headcount in Germany, they've crossed the crossover threshold. It's time to set up their own German GmbH and migrate their employees off EOR. They go to Remote and ask for help migrating their German employees to their own entity. Remote's response, helpful, well-intentioned, is essentially a documentation package, a checklist, a guide to the migration process, a recommendation to engage local counsel. What they actually need is someone who has done this migration before. In Germany, who knows the Betriebsrat notification requirements, the payroll cutover timing, the IP assignment transition, the way to protect the employee's continuity of employment so they don't lose statutory rights in the move. Documentation is not support. A checklist is not a specialist. And in Germany, where employment law has specific requirements around every step of a corporate restructure, what you need is someone in your corner who knows the law before you ask. At Teamed, same CFO, same migration. From the moment the crossover threshold is flagged, which Teamed does proactively, 5 business days before the client crosses it, a specialist is already building the migration timeline. The Works Council notification handled, payroll cutover planned to the day, employment continuity protected throughout. The GmbH is set up, the employees are migrated, and the client has their own entity. Intact, compliant, ready to run. The migration takes 8 weeks, not 4 months. The pattern. Look at the 3 scenarios together. A payroll question on a Friday, a compliance change in the Netherlands, a GmbH migration in Germany. In every case, Remote's infrastructure is present. The platform exists, the coverage exists, the compliance knowledge exists somewhere in the system. But getting to it requires patience, escalation, and sometimes luck with the timing. At Teamed, the knowledge isn't in the system, it's in the person on your account. That's not a feature difference, it's a model difference. And a model difference changes everything about what global employment actually feels like when things get complicated. Remote is a capable platform. If your global hiring is largely standard, largely stable, and largely managed through a dashboard, they'll serve you well. But if you need someone who flags the Dutch chain regulation before it triggers, who calls you about the German crossover threshold before you ask, who has a named specialist in Vietnam and Nigeria ready to move in 24 hours, who picks up on a Friday at 4 p.m. because that's when things actually go wrong, that's a different kind of provider. And it's the kind we've built Teamed to be. If you recognize your company in any of those 3 scenarios, or you want to know whether Teamed covers the specific countries you need to hire in, book a free consultation. Not a sales call, a real conversation about your real situation. Visit teamed.global. The link is in the description. No ticket number, no 48-hour wait. Just a real person, within a few minutes. Subscribe for a new global hiring guide every week. We'll see you in the next one.